She returned to the dealership to pick up her car. The paperwork had already been signed. Everything should have been complete until she asked one simple question. Why wasn't this fee in the contract yesterday? The salesman didn't smile. His voice dropped, icy with threat. You already signed. Now, shut up and take the car. But what he didn't know was that someone was watching silently. Someone he absolutely shouldn't lie to. A fraudulent contract, an unusual login at 9:30 p.m., and a terrible secret was about to come to light, one no one at this dealership ever expected. Amanda Clark, a young black woman with sharp, determined eyes, walked slowly into the finance office's reception area. In her hand was a thick file containing every document related to her purchase of the silver Corolla she'd been waiting for so long. Amanda had been meticulous. She'd read every clause before signing just yesterday. That's why she'd come back this morning feeling relaxed and excited, ready to drive her first car home. But that warm feeling evaporated the moment she noticed the fee breakdown on the contract Jason Miller, the finance rep, handed her. She frowned, her expression immediately skeptical. "Mr. Miller," Amanda said gently, keeping her voice as calm as possible. "Why are these fees on here? I'm certain they weren't in the contract I signed yesterday." Jason, a man in his 30s with neatly slicked back hair and a perpetual smile, stiffened. The smile vanished in an instant, replaced by a flicker of annoyance across his cold features. "Oh, those are just standard add-ons," he replied smoothly, deliberately avoiding her gaze. He flipped a finger over the line items. "You know, electronic protection fee, interior sanitation, VIN etching. We mention them all the time." Amanda remained steady but firm. "No," she said. "I remember clearly that none of these were discussed. I read the contract carefully before I signed." Jason let out an impatient sigh, his eyes narrowing with a hint of contempt. "Ms. Clark, honestly, these are just after-sale formalities. Just initial here so I can hand over the keys." Amanda shook her head slowly. "I think I have a right to understand these charges. I don't want to pay for things that weren't clearly explained." Jason's brow furrowed as he struggled to contain his irritation. He glanced around to be sure no one else was paying attention, then leaned in close, his voice lowered to a threatening whisper. "Look, you signed the contract, okay? No one forced you. Now be quiet, take your car, and don't waste my time." His words landed like a blade to Amanda's pride. She froze for a moment, her breath catching, her cheeks flushing with anger and humiliation. But she forced her emotions down, took a steadying breath, and met his gaze without flinching. Jason straightened and turned back to his desk as if the conversation were over, showing no concern for the black woman standing before him. He was certain, like so many customers before her, that Amanda would bow her head and comply under the pressure of a polished salesman. What Jason didn't know, and what neither Amanda nor the branch manager suspected, was that from a hidden corner down the hallway, a man was watching every move and every word. He was David Reeves, CEO of Reeves Auto Group, and that silent witness who saw her take a stand would soon unleash a storm that would change everything at this dealership. From the dimly lit corner of the hallway, the casually dressed black man stood perfectly still, silently observing every cruel word Jason Miller had just leveled at Amanda. This was David Reeves, CEO of Reeves Auto Group, and owner of the region's largest dealership chain. But this morning, he didn't look anything like the polished figure in the business pages. No tailored suit, no luxury watch. He wore a worn gray jacket, faded sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low over eyes that were razor-sharp as they tracked the salesman's contemptuous behavior toward his customer. A beat-up 2010 Honda Civic tucked away in the lot behind the dealership only reinforced David's low-profile disguise. That was exactly his intention, to slip in unnoticed and witness firsthand the reality playing out at a place that bore his name. He cast a slow glance around the showroom. The atmosphere today was the opposite of the upbeat reports he'd been getting every month. Here, the energy was lethargic and cold. Employees racing through their tasks just to clock out. No smiles, no genuine engagement, and no concern when questions or confusion flickered across a buyer's face. David took measured steps down the narrow corridor linking the service area to the seldom-used waiting lounge. This passage led straight to the finance office, where Jason was still pressing Amanda to accept his unfair terms. David paused beside a glass-walled display of after-sales brochures, leaning in just enough to watch. From his vantage point, Amanda's disappointment and tension were written plainly on her face, but to David's wonder, she remained composed and resolute. Then a memory flickered. This face was oddly familiar. He summoned the recollection, and a jolt of recognition hit him. Amanda wasn't just any customer. Years ago, Amanda Clark had worked as an accountant at Reeves Auto Group's Nashville regional office. She had unearthed serious financial misconduct within the company back then. David remembered her as sharp, impartial, and passionately principled, standing her ground even under intense pressure from above. Then, inexplicably, she'd quietly left the company without explanation. No exit interview, no HR announcement. David had searched for answers but found no trace. And now here she was, back in his world, forced to endure exactly the kind of malpractice she once exposed. David studied Jason Miller more closely. The salesman's slicked-back hair, trendy suit, and calculating eyes. He wasn't fumbling or nervous. This was a practiced routine. Slipping hidden fees onto contracts after signatures were gathered, banking on customers who wouldn't or couldn't push back. The deeper David looked, the more he realized the gravity of this scheme. It wasn't just Jason. The entire management culture here had grown comfortable padding contracts with vague surcharges, especially against anyone they deemed too polite or timid to object, like Amanda. With a cold, determined glare, David knew he couldn't stand by any longer. But he also understood something crucial. To root out this corruption, he needed to see it through, to witness how far Jason would take his deceit and how Amanda would respond under pressure. He inhaled slowly, stepped back into the hallway, and maintained a calm watch as Jason continued his manipulation. A silent fury burned within David, but he held it in check. He needed to act with precision to protect the ethical foundation he'd built this company on. Quietly, he moved to a new spot that offered a full view of the finance office. David realized this confrontation wasn't just about an unusual fee. It was a battle for the soul and reputation of the very dealership carrying his name. As he settled into his fresh vantage point, his heartbeat quickened. Behind the glass, Amanda's expression had shifted from doubt to steadfast resolve. David saw clearly now that she wouldn't cave in as Jason expected. It was time to intervene sooner than he'd planned. Straightening his jacket collar, David took a decisive step toward the finance office door. One step closer to justice, one step closer to reclaiming the trust that had been betrayed under his very roof. As David drew closer to the finance office, his steps suddenly slowed and his breath felt heavier. From this vantage point, Amanda's face was illuminated more clearly than ever by the cold, white, fluorescent lights. She stood there, clutching the thick file of documents to her chest, as if protecting the most precious thing in her life, her worried gaze drifting repeatedly to the small bassinet beside her. David felt a tight knot in his chest. He rubbed his eyes, and memories flooded back as vividly as if they had happened yesterday. Amanda Clark was not a stranger to him. She had once been the promising accountant at the Nashville regional office who, 2 years ago, bravely exposed serious financial irregularities within the company. He remembered her walking into the senior manager's conference room, placing clear evidence on the director's desk, and methodically pointing out each line of embezzled funds. On that day, Amanda wore a simple white blouse. Though her voice trembled slightly, it was unwaveringly determined as she presented her findings to the leadership team. At first, everyone praised her courage and sense of responsibility. Yet just days later, Amanda vanished without a trace. No resignation letter, no exit interview, no HR notice, just a deafening silence. When David tried to investigate, every record of Amanda seemed to have been wiped clean. He could still feel the anxiety he'd felt holding her final report. The clear, meticulously checked numbers that exposed the theft. And then, utter nothingness. No explanation for why someone so unflinchingly principled would suddenly walk away from her career. Now, that same woman stood before him once more, not as the sharp-eyed accountant he remembered, but as an ordinary customer suffering the very deceit she once fought to uncover. Beside Amanda, a tiny baby girl slept soundly in her pink bassinet, her breathing soft and steady. The sight tightened the grip on David's heart even more. He realized Amanda bore the weight of a single mother's struggle, doing everything in her power to build a better life for her daughter. Knowing this made him angrier still at Jason's callous behavior and the broken culture that allowed it. Jason Miller sat there, expression unmoved, continuing to manipulate Amanda without the slightest regard for her feelings or situation. He rattled off his justifications for the added fees as though reading from a rehearsed script. An everyday performance he seemed to believe was perfectly acceptable, as though the person before him was not a real woman with real burdens. David clenched his fist. Jason's arrogance and cruelty weren't just the failings of one man. They reflected a far deeper rot at the heart of David's own company. A culture once defined by integrity and respect was now being corroded from within by greed, deception, and dehumanization. He looked again at Amanda. In her eyes he saw not only disappointment and anxiety, but a silent, burgeoning resolve. She had fought for the truth once before, and David knew that, even now, faced with this injustice, she would not be intimidated into submission. In that moment, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Amanda may not have realized he was standing nearby, but David knew he could not remain silent while she stood alone against this wrong. This was not just a fight for one customer, it was a battle for the honor and soul of Reeves Auto Group itself, a company that once stood for transparency, kindness, and respect for every individual, regardless of who they were or where they came from. Quietly, he took another step toward the finance office. His mind was clear now about what he must do. He would protect Amanda, restore her faith, and, most importantly, reclaim the soul of the company that had been so carelessly abandoned by employees like Jason Miller. Standing before the glass door of the finance office, David took a deep breath and placed his hand on the handle. There was no more time for hesitation. The ghosts of the past were urging him to act, not only to save Amanda, but to save the values he had once built his company upon. He pushed the door open and stepped into the decisive confrontation that would restore fairness, transparency, and dignity to Amanda Clark, and to every overlooked customer betrayed by a system decaying from the inside out. When the glass door quietly clicked shut behind David, he could hear Jason Miller's scheming voice coming from the finance office. Seated confidently across from Amanda in his crisp suit and perfectly slicked-back hair, Jason was the picture of professionalism. But beneath that polished facade lay a terrifyingly well-rehearsed deception. "Miss Clark, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jason began smoothly, offering a flawless, insincere smile that could fool anyone. He set the contract on the desk and tapped each fee lightly with his finger, as if they were mere administrative details unworthy of discussion. These charges are our company's new standard. You see, to guarantee your safety and protect your interests, we now require an electronic protection fee, an interior sanitation fee, and of course, the VIN etching fee. Amanda held Jason's gaze steadily, her voice calm but resolute. I'm pretty sure those fees weren't mentioned before, and as far as I know, Reeves Auto stopped charging the VIN etching fee quite a while ago. For a split second, David saw a flicker of tension pass over Jason's face. Then, almost instantly, the salesman returned to his nonchalant demeanor, as if her question were nothing more than a foolish misunderstanding on her part. Jason offered a thin smile, sharper and colder than before, and leaned forward, hands flat on the desk as though explaining plain fact. Ms. Clark, I've been here long enough to know every policy by heart. I assure you, these fees are not only mandatory, but also highly beneficial. Take the electronic protection fee. It helps ensure your vehicle's systems run smoothly, preventing unexpected breakdowns. And the interior sanitation fee? That's a post-pandemic requirement to safeguard our customers' health. Amanda frowned, clearly not convinced by Jason's slick and slickly delivered explanations. And what about the VIN etching fee? She pressed. I used to work in this industry, and I'm certain your company abandoned that charge a long time ago. Jason leaned back, his expression shifting to irritation and challenge. You must be confusing us with another dealership, Miss Clark. Reeves Auto has never stopped charging for VIN etching. In fact, we've recently upgraded our security protocols around it. Standing outside the door, David felt his blood boil. He knew all too well that the VIN etching fee had been banned across his entire network over a year ago, after an internal audit revealed some dealerships were charging it without actually etching anything. And here was Jason, brazenly resurrecting the old scam, not only to deceive a customer but to flout David's own policies. Amanda remained firm. I'd like to see where those terms are documented in your official policy materials. Jason snorted in derision, opened his drawer, and slapped a printed sheet onto the desk. This is our latest internal policy. Feel free to read it, though I suggest you sign quickly. I doubt you want to waste more time here. David recognized that document instantly as a crude forgery. Mismatched fonts, a garbled title. Nothing like the polished PDF standards issued by corporate. Worse, Jason's confidence suggested he was certain Amanda wouldn't take the time to scrutinize it, and would be forced into compliance. But Amanda calmly flipped through the pages, her focus unwavering. David watched her every move with growing admiration for her persistence and courage. Meanwhile, Jason's patience had worn thin. He checked his watch and then fixed her with a hard stare, his breath growing heavier. Rising to his feet, he could no longer mask his frustration. Listen, Miss Clark, I don't have all day to explain every tiny detail. If you're not satisfied, we can cancel the contract, but good luck finding a better deal at Reeves Auto. Decide quickly. Amanda looked up, her eyes now blazing with firm resolve. I just want clarity, that's all. Outside, David felt the tension snapping like a taut wire. He placed a steady hand on the door handle, determination shining in his eyes, knowing the moment to act had arrived. This was more than a bogus contract. It was a battle for the trust and integrity he had spent years building at Reeves Auto. David pushed the door open and stepped inside, ready to confront Jason Miller and restore justice for Amanda. The moment David's hand touched the door, Jason Miller's icy voice cut through the office's tense silence like a knife. You already signed. Now shut up and take the car. His words, barely above a whisper and meant only for Amanda, struck David like a blow, igniting a furious blaze in his chest. He froze for a heartbeat, breathing quickening as he witnessed Jason's blatant contempt for Amanda, a customer who'd once given so much to his company. Inside, Amanda stiffened, eyes widening in shock and anger. She instinctively gripped her file tighter, cheeks flushing, but forced herself to remain calm. Drawing a deep breath, she met Jason's gaze with quiet defiance. I don't think you have any right to speak to me that way. I have every right to review my documents thoroughly before making my final decision. Jason, clearly taken aback by her bold response, flickered with surprise, then swiftly sank back into his arrogant composure. His eyes darkened with impatience. He scanned the room to ensure no one else was listening, leaned in toward Amanda, and sneered. I don't know who you think you are, but let's be real, Amanda. You signed the contract. No one forced you. Now, don't waste any more of my time. Amanda nearly couldn't believe her ears. His insult stung, but she refused to back down. She rose slowly to her feet, eyes sharper and more determined than ever. I won't be silenced just because you want me to accept these unreasonable terms. Jason leaned back, a mocking smile twisting his lips. Oh, so you think you're the first to push back on these fees? Every other customer did exactly what you're doing, and in the end, they all took their cars, because nobody wants to deal with hassle. You'll do the same, Amanda. His smug assurance rattled Amanda, but before she could reply, the finance office door swung wide with a resonant click that shattered the tension. David Reeves strode in with purposeful steps, eyes locking onto Jason like a warning. Jason sprang to his feet, his confident facade crumbling into alarm. What's going on here? David's deep, authoritative voice filled the room. Jason stammered, unable to maintain his bravado. I was just explaining the necessary terms of the contract to the customer, sir. David raised an eyebrow, voice cold and unwavering. Explaining? I heard every word you told Miss Clark, and that wasn't explaining. That was threatening and insulting a customer. Jason recoiled, his voice shrinking. Who are you to intervene in this? David stepped forward, eyes steely. I'm David Reeves, CEO of Reeves Auto Group, and I think you know exactly who I am. Jason went pale, sweat beading at his temples. His usual arrogance vanished, replaced by genuine fear. Turning to Amanda, David's expression softened immediately. Miss Clark, I'm truly sorry for what you've endured. I promise to make this right and ensure you receive the fairness you deserve. Amanda, both stunned and deeply moved, nodded quietly at him. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. David's gaze returned to Jason, filled with resolute authority. And you, Jason Miller, you will be held fully accountable for what just happened here. The room's atmosphere grew heavier than ever. Jason bowed his head, knowing his deceit had been exposed. Amanda stood beside David, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. David understood that this was only the first step in reclaiming his company's integrity, ethics, and customers' trust. As he turned to leave, David carried with him the resolve that Jason's insult wasn't just a breach of business ethics, it was the last straw, compelling him to act stronger than ever to protect Amanda and every other customer from such injustice. The instant David's hand touched the door, Jason Miller's sharp voice cut through the room's tense silence like a blade. You already signed. Now shut up and take the car. Though barely above a whisper and directed only at Amanda, the words struck David like a blow. igniting an uncontrollable fury in his chest. He froze for a heartbeat, breath quickening as he watched Jason's blatant contempt for Amanda, a customer who had once given so much to his own company. Inside, Amanda froze, eyes widening in surprise and anger. Her hands clenched the stack of documents tighter against her chest, her cheeks flushing, yet she forced herself to remain calm. Drawing in a steadying breath, she met Jason's gaze with quiet defiance. "I don't think you have the right to talk to me that way. I have every right to review these papers thoroughly before making my decision." Jason, clearly unprepared for her bold reply, flickered with uncertainty, then quickly reclaimed his arrogant composure. His eyes darkened with impatience. He glanced around to be sure no one else heard, leaned in toward Amanda, and sneered, "I don't know who you think you are, but let's be realistic, Amanda. You signed the contract. No one forced you. Now, don't waste any more of my time." Amanda could hardly believe her ears. His insult stung, but she refused to back down. Rising deliberately to her feet, her eyes sharper and more resolute than ever, she said, "I won't be quiet just because you want me to accept these unfair terms." Jason leaned back, a mocking smile twisting his lips. "So, you think you're the first to challenge these fees? Every other customer has done exactly what you're doing. And in the end, they all took their cars, because nobody wants to deal with the hassle. You'll do the same, Amanda." His smug assurance rattled her. But before she could respond, the finance office door swung open with a decisive clang that shattered the tension. David Reeves strode in, every step firm and purposeful, his gaze locking onto Jason like a warning. Jason sprang to his feet, his confident veneer crumbling into alarm. "What's going on here?" David's deep, authoritative voice filled the room. Jason stammered, unable to find his usual bravado. I was just explaining the necessary contract terms to the customer, sir." David raised an eyebrow, voice cold and unwavering. "Explaining?" "I heard every word you said to Miss Clark, and that wasn't explaining. That was threatening and insulting a customer." Jason recoiled, voice shrinking. Who are you to intervene in this?" David stepped forward, eyes steely. "I'm David Reeves, CEO of Reeves Auto Group, and I think you know exactly who I am." Jason went pale, sweat beading on his forehead. His normal arrogance vanished, replaced by genuine fear. Turning to Amanda, David's expression softened. "Ms. Clark, I deeply apologize for what you've experienced. I promise to make this right and ensure you face no unjust fees." Amanda, both astonished and relieved, nodded quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves." David's gaze returned to Jason, resolute and unforgiving. "And you, Jason Miller, you will be held fully accountable for this." Jason stood silent, shoulders slumped, understanding that his deception had ended here, in front of Amanda and the man he never expected to confront. David turned and walked out the door, leaving behind a heavy but just stillness. In that moment, he knew he'd done the right thing, not just for Amanda, but for the honor and future of the company he'd built on honesty and integrity. Just as David reached the threshold of the finance office, the door suddenly swung open from the outside. Branch manager Mark Thompson hurried in, phone still buzzing in his hand. He glanced upward, then froze as if he'd walked into an invisible wall. His eyes went wide in shock when he recognized the familiar face standing before him. David Reeves, the CEO and the true owner of the entire company. "Mr. Reeves," Mark blurted, his voice so low it was almost inaudible. His face flushed, then drained pale in mere seconds. David looked Mark in the eye, his expression unflinching. "Yes, it's me, Mark. And it looks like you arrived just in time." Mark swallowed, hastily slipping his phone into his pocket and trying to steady his trembling hands, though tension still lined his features. I heard there was a small issue with a customer, so I came to resolve it. But I had no idea you'd be here in person today. I'm sorry. I wasn't informed in advance." David raised an eyebrow, his tone calm but razor-sharp. "What exactly did you consider small, Mark?" "Your employee blatantly deceived and insulted a customer right in front of me. Do you think that's a minor matter?" Mark's face went white as he glanced at Jason, who now stood frozen, looking dazed as if struck by lightning. Mark strode over to Jason, his voice sharp but low so as not to further rile David. "Jason, what's going on here? What did you do to a customer that required Mr. Reeves himself to step in?" Jason didn't reply at once. His eyes remained fixed on David, horror and disbelief stark on his face. Finally, he spoke, his voice weak with desperation. I didn't know who he was, Mr. Thompson. I was just doing what I always do." Mark's face registered alarm as he realized the gravity of the situation. He spun to David, voice trembling as he tried to explain. "Please, Mr. Reeves, understand. Jason is a veteran salesman here. He can be a bit overzealous, but I don't believe he intended to insult the customer. Perhaps it's all just a misunderstanding." David's gaze grew colder as he looked Mark straight in the eye. "A misunderstanding. I was right here, watching everything from start to finish, Mark. Jason not only duped the customer with bogus charges, electronic protection, interior sanitation, and the VIN etching fee I officially banned over a year ago after the Arkansas scandal. But he then openly insulted Miss Clark with unacceptable language. That's not zeal, Mark. That's a serious breach of ethics." Mark stood speechless, David's words striking at his pride. He turned back to Jason, disappointment and anger in his eyes. "Jason, explain to Mr. Reeves right now why you imposed these fake fees. Who authorized you to do that?" Jason hung his head, shoulders slumped, voice trembling and devoid of confidence. I was only following your direction, Mr. Thompson. You said we needed to boost revenue by any means. These fees were implicitly approved by you long ago." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Jason's confession hit like a bomb, and David's glare shifted from Jason to Mark with relentless intensity. Mark's face drained further, his voice a hurried excuse. "Mr. Reeves, please understand. I never directly ordered this. I only suggested we optimize revenue. I had no idea Jason would resort to these improper tactics." David cut him off coldly. "Optimizing revenue is never an excuse to deceive customers. Do you know why Reeves Auto has succeeded? Because we put customers first, not profit at any cost. You've forgotten the company's most fundamental principle." Mark fell silent, shame and regret overwhelming him. He dared not meet David's steely gaze any longer. David turned back to Amanda, his eyes much softer, as he addressed the young mother quietly, holding her files and her sleeping daughter. "Miss Clark, I will see this matter through and ensure you receive the justice you deserve. Once again, I apologize for everything that transpired today." Amanda met David's gaze, relief and gratitude shining on her face. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I feel so much better knowing you're personally handling this." David gave her a gentle nod, then faced Mark and Jason with unyielding severity. "As for the two of you, we will continue this discussion in my office. I expect a full explanation of what's been happening at this dealership." Mark Thompson and Jason Miller fell silent, heads bowed, and followed David out of the room. They both understood that their secret was fully exposed. There was nothing left to hide or defend. David walked ahead, back straight and resolve stronger than ever. He knew this was just the beginning of a long battle to cleanse his entire organization and protect the core values of Reeves Auto: honesty and respect for every customer who walks through these doors. The oppressive silence trailed their footsteps as David led Jason and Mark out of the finance office and into the wide corridor. Every employee in the dealership had noticed their CEO's rare appearance, and curious, tense gazes followed the trio as they walked in heavy quiet. David stopped in the center of the hall, far enough back that everyone could see clearly. He turned to Jason and spoke in a steady, commanding voice that cut through the hush. "Jason Miller, effective immediately, you are terminated from Reeves Auto Group. I cannot tolerate an employee who disrespects and exploits a customer's trust for personal gain. Your actions violated the very core ethical principles of this company." Each word landed like a blow, slicing through the tense stillness. Jason froze in place, his face draining of color as if his strength had been sucked away. He couldn't speak, his eyes empty with disbelief. Mark Thompson, standing beside him, bowed his head in shame and helplessness. He understood that his own lax oversight and failure to act had contributed to this crisis. David didn't wait for a response. He turned to Amanda, who stood near the finance office door clutching her file to her chest, her little daughter still sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. Amanda's expression had softened, her earlier tension and hurt replaced by deep gratitude and relief. David stepped forward, his tone now gentle and warm, far different from the merciless clarity he'd shown Jason and Mark moments before. "Miss Clark, I'm truly sorry. This is not how we treat our customers, especially under my name. What you've endured can't be fully undone with words alone, but I promise to correct this mistake completely." Amanda looked up, tears welling in her eyes as her voice trembled with emotion. "I never expected you'd come in person and fix this. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. You have no idea how much this means to me." David offered a sincere smile, full of empathy. "I understand, Miss Clark. I feel outrage and disappointment that a customer, especially someone who once served this company so responsibly, was treated this way. Reeves Auto's fundamental values never change for anyone, customer or employee. Those are trust, honesty, and respect." Amanda bowed her head slightly, struggling to hold back tears. She never imagined that her past fight for transparency and fairness would still be remembered and honored by the company's CEO. David continued, his voice firm and full of clear commitment. "I promise you'll receive a completely transparent and fair contract. All of those bogus fees will be removed, and you will only pay what was originally agreed. We will handle this openly, so no one else ever has to endure what you did." Amanda nodded, her voice soft but genuine. "Again, thank you, Mr. Reeves. I truly appreciate everything you've done. It means so much to me and my daughter." David smiled gently, and then addressed all the staff gathered in the dealership, his tone once more solemn and direct. "I want everyone here to understand this. Reeves Auto is built on absolute trust and honesty with our customers. There is never, ever a reason to tolerate or excuse deceit or the betrayal of a customer's trust. From this moment forward, remember that your personal and our company's honor rests in your hands." The employees around them nodded quietly, many unable to meet David's gaze but fully aware of the gravity and sincerity of his message. David turned back to Amanda, speaking softly yet audibly for all to hear. "Miss Clark, thank you again for standing up and speaking out against injustice. It's people like you who truly make Reeves Auto better." Amanda managed a small, tearful smile. "I only did what I thought was right, Mr. Reeves." David nodded in satisfaction and then turned to leave the showroom. Jason and Mark remained frozen in place, still reeling from the shock of what had just occurred. As the large front doors closed gently behind David, everyone in the dealership understood that this was no ordinary workday. It was a reminder that trust and honesty are the company's greatest treasures, and anyone who betrays them will pay the price, just as Jason Miller did today. As soon as the dealership's large doors closed softly behind him, David paused, taking in the bustling street before him. In that rare moment of quiet, he realized something vital, that what had happened today wasn't just Jason's individual misconduct or Mark Thompson's managerial failure. It was a clear sign of a much deeper, more serious problem quietly festering within his own business system. David understood that this ethical decay couldn't have occurred overnight. It began with small oversights and a gradual erosion of moral standards. Standing there, his heart heavy, he recognized that he'd inadvertently ignored warning signs, minor customer complaints, improbably high profits flagged as suspicious at this branch. He'd brushed them off, trusting that everything was under control. Now, looking back on the day's events, David knew he had to act decisively to root out the problem. He strode back to the management office and immediately called an emergency meeting with the entire Reeves Auto leadership team. Mark Thompson, still smarting from his earlier embarrassment, sat quietly in a corner, avoiding David's gaze. The other managers looked tense as David stood at the head of the conference table, his voice unwavering and determined. "I want you all to understand that today's incident is not just an isolated mistake. It's the result of a workplace culture that has severely deteriorated in business ethics. We can no longer turn a blind eye to this." David scanned the room with a sharp but composed look. "Effective immediately, I'm ordering a full review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Any fees that lack transparency or have been deemed unreasonable by customers must be refunded in full, right now. We will personally contact each affected customer to apologize and resolve their complaints once and for all." The room felt as though it had grown colder. Everyone sensed the gravity of his words. David pressed on, his tone even firmer. "In addition, I will meet one-on-one with every employee at this branch to assess their work attitudes and professional ethics. No one is exempt, from senior management to sales consultants, even the technical and reception teams. This is the moment we must confront the truth head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." Only then did Mark Thompson look up, his voice trembling. "Mr. Reeves, I'm truly sorry. I was wrong to focus solely on sales numbers and neglect tighter oversight of our staff. I'll take full responsibility." David cut him off gently but decisively, his eyes steely. "Mark, we'll address individual accountability later. But the issue here isn't just one person. It's our corporate culture. It's been allowed to rot over time. Reeves Auto has always stood for transparency and customer trust. Anyone who doesn't uphold those values has no place here." Mark nodded in silence, fully aware that this time there was no quick fix. The other managers remained silent, heads hung in worry and uncertainty. David continued, "I also want to make this crystal clear. We will rebuild our ethical oversight system with far stricter controls. Any deceptive behavior or disregard for customers, no matter how small, will be met with severe consequences. Starting now, every transaction must be absolutely transparent. Honesty is Reeves Auto's highest standard." The managers exchanged tentative glances, some nodding in agreement. They seemed to realize that this was their chance to rebuild the branch's lost reputation and regain customer trust. Finally, David closed the meeting with one last emphatic statement. Remember this: Reeves Auto is more than just an auto dealership. We represent integrity and trust. I never want anyone to forget those core values again. The managers all nodded, their commitment plain in their expressions. They understood that from this moment forward, the dealership was entering a new era, one of responsibility, integrity, and restoration. As the room emptied, David remained seated, deep in thought about what had just transpired. He knew handling the immediate crisis was only the beginning. The real work of restoring Reeves Auto's foundational values would be long and arduous. Yet his eyes shone with unwavering resolve. He believed that through decisive action, transparency, and steadfast determination, Reeves Auto could overcome these challenges and return to the trust, honesty, and respect for customers that built its brand. David knew he had no choice but to face this head-on, and this time, he would let no mistake go unaddressed. The heavy atmosphere followed David as he led Jason and Mark out of the finance office and into the spacious hallway. Word had spread of the CEO's unexpected appearance, and every employee watched the trio in tense silence, eyes wide with anxiety and curiosity. The clock on the wall ticked each slow second, making the air feel even more stifling. David stopped in the center of the corridor, where everyone could see him clearly, and let his gaze sweep over the familiar faces. He held that silence for a moment to make sure they all felt the gravity of the moment. "I know you're all wondering why I came down here myself today," David began, his voice calm but powerful. "What happened this morning with our customer, Amanda Clark, wasn't a minor mistake. It was a sign of a deeper, more serious problem in this dealership, the loss of the core values that built Reeves Auto." His words landed like heavy stones, and the hallway fell completely silent. David stepped aside and pointed to a large screen behind him, which now displayed a scruffy, empty lot with a few old cars lined up beside a simple one-story building. "Do you recognize this place?" he asked, voice tinged with emotion but unwavering. "Nearly 20 years ago, I started Reeves Auto Group here from scratch. I had almost no capital, no grand business plan, nothing but honesty and a deep respect for every customer who walked through that little shop's door." He paused, letting the memory sink in as he looked around the room. Every employee seemed drawn into his story. "I remember every car I sold in those early days, not for their value, but because I took the time to understand each customer, to hear their story, and to ensure every deal left them completely satisfied. I believed that honesty and respect alone would build a lasting brand." David took a steady breath and continued, his tone now laced with genuine disappointment. "But looking at what transpired today, I realize we've forgotten those values. We've let trust and honesty be replaced by tempting profit margins that are empty of ethics, and I wonder, how did we let this happen?" No one dared answer. Every head stayed bowed under the weight of his words. He locked eyes with Mark Thompson, who shrank back into a corner, and then addressed the entire staff. "I want each of you to ask yourselves if you've truly lived up to your roles. Have you put personal gain above the customer's best interests? I want honest answers." An absolute silence blanketed the hallway. David stepped closer, softening slightly as he saw the younger employees at the back hanging on his every word. "I know there are many here who once poured their heart into this job, who genuinely cared about our customers and believed in our founding principles, but somewhere along the way, we lost our way, and we let people like Jason Miller set the standard." He paused again, voice sharpening. "Today, right now, that ends. Anyone who does not believe in honesty or respect for our customers will have no place at Reeves Auto. From this moment on, I expect every employee to reevaluate themselves, to scrutinize their actions and attitudes. This is our opportunity to restore the trust we've lost." His powerful declaration resonated through the corridor. Some employees exchanged looks of agreement and relief. They understood this was more than a reprimand. It was their chance to reclaim their professional pride and integrity. David glanced around one last time, his voice lowering but unwavering. "I will personally oversee the fulfillment of these commitments. I believe we can and must rebuild the values that made Reeves Auto Group a trusted name, and I believe you all want that as much as I do." The entire corridor nodded in unison, determination flickering in their eyes. No one spoke. Everyone knew this was a defining moment for themselves and for the company. When David stepped out of the room, the atmosphere had shifted. Though still tense, every employee felt the weight and purpose behind his words, and most importantly, they understood that from now on, honesty and respect for the customer would be at the heart of every decision and every action at Reeves Auto. The moment David finished speaking, a profound silence fell over the conference room, as if no one dared disturb the gravity of his words. For an instant, everyone felt the weight of his message. David looked down, took a deep breath, as though gathering his next thought. After a brief pause, he raised his head and let his gaze rest deliberately on one young man standing at the back of the room. Trevor Evans, a customer service representative known among his colleagues for his dedication, honesty, and willingness to help, no matter how small the matter. "Trevor Evans," David suddenly called, shattering the hush. Every head turned toward Trevor, who started slightly, then looked up in surprise. Yes, Mr. Reeves?" Trevor replied, stepping forward hesitantly, his expression a mix of astonishment and nervousness. David offered a gentle smile, though his tone remained solemn and sincere. "I've been reviewing our recent customer feedback, and I was particularly struck by the many glowing comments about one employee who puts the customer's needs and satisfaction first, who truly listens, shares, and helps with genuine kindness. That employee is you, Trevor Evans." Trevor stood frozen for a moment, deeply moved but speechless. David stepped forward and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder, his voice warm, yet still loud enough for all to hear. "Trevor, I know your honesty and commitment have too often been overlooked in the push for sales and profits, but today, I want to make it crystal clear to everyone. People like you are the future of Reeves Auto. The values you embody are the real foundation of this company." Trevor's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude, stunned that his quiet efforts were being publicly acknowledged by the CEO himself. David's voice grew strong and proud. "To show how serious I am about restoring and promoting Reeves Auto's core values, I'd like to offer you something more than just thanks. Effective immediately, you are no longer just a customer service representative. I am officially appointing you as Customer Service Team Leader, responsible for overseeing and rebuilding our entire branch's service standards." A ripple of astonishment swept the room. Colleagues exchanged amazed, admiring glances. Trevor's mouth hung open in disbelief. David smiled and drew an official appointment letter from his jacket pocket, handing it to Trevor in front of the entire staff. "This is your official letter of appointment. I trust you will continue to lead with the honesty, dedication, and passion you've always shown." Trevor took the letter with trembling hands, his voice choked with emotion. I really don't know what to say, Mr. Reeves. I've only ever tried to do my best, and I promise I won't let you, or anyone, down." David nodded approvingly, then addressed the assembled employees with conviction. "Look at Trevor, everyone. This is the example we must follow. Honesty, dedication, respect, and unwavering customer focus. Reeves Auto doesn't need people who chase numbers at any cost. We need those with integrity, transparency, and commitment to our core values." Slowly, applause began, tentative at first, then growing stronger and more confident, as if the team had been awakened from complacency. In that moment, Trevor felt the weight of his new responsibilities and the immense pride of being so deeply trusted. David stepped back, closing his remarks with encouragement. "I believe every one of us here can change and become our best selves. And I believe that, under the leadership of people like Trevor, Reeves Auto will quickly regain the trust and admiration of our customers." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving behind a staff newly inspired, and Trevor standing taller than ever, ready to embrace the challenge of reviving the values that made Reeves Auto a respected name. For Trevor, today marked more than just a career step forward. It was a powerful affirmation that honesty and kindness, qualities he had quietly upheld since his first day, truly matter. Immediately after Trevor's appointment, the mood at the Reeves Auto dealership lightened noticeably. Yet David knew this was only the beginning. Small changes wouldn't uproot the deep-seated problems that had long plagued the system. To truly overhaul the operation, he needed someone with both capability and courage. Someone who had understood Reeves Auto's founding values from day one, and who would speak uncomfortable truths no matter how bitter. There was only one person he thought of: Helen Brooks, the former customer service manager who had left the company over a year ago because she couldn't tolerate the ethical decay she witnessed at this branch. That afternoon, David called Helen. Their conversation was brief but charged with tension and relief when Helen agreed to return, visibly moved that David was determined to rebuild the workplace around the values they both once championed. A few days later, Helen walked through the dealership doors with steely determination and bright, resolute eyes. Longtime staffers couldn't hide their surprise and delight at her return. Helen's presence was more than a positive sign. It was the clearest symbol yet of the comprehensive reform David was enacting. At her first meeting with the entire customer service team, Helen wasted no time making her stance clear. Standing at the front of the room, her voice rang with authority. "I didn't leave Reeves Auto because I stopped loving this work," she declared. "I left because I could no longer accept the serious decline in how we treat our customers. I'm back today because I believe every one of us can do better, can restore the trust we unintentionally lost from the very people who once believed in us." Everyone listened intently, sensing the sincerity and seriousness in her words. Helen's eyes shone with conviction as she continued. "Starting today, we will build a system that is absolutely transparent. I refuse to allow any secret dealings between employees and customers. Transparency is the firmest foundation on which we will earn back the trust we squandered." Helen immediately rolled out a bold, concrete plan. She ordered large glass partitions installed between the finance office and the sales floor, eliminating any opportunity for staff to manipulate customers or slip in hidden fees without public oversight. "From now on, every transaction will happen in full view of everyone here," Helen announced, her gaze challenging any who felt uneasy with this level of openness. If transparency makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself why. Her decisiveness sparked immediate change. Those who had quietly skirted the rules felt mounting pressure, while the honest, dedicated staff felt a renewed drive to deliver their best work. But Helen didn't stop at the partitions. She launched a brand new customer feedback system in which clients evaluate their service immediately after each transaction. Any negative comments or complaints are now logged and addressed directly by Helen or Trevor Evans, ensuring no customer is ever ignored. Meanwhile, David made a point of visiting the dealership more often. Not to interfere, but to visibly support Helen's decisive measures. He knew her reforms were the key to restoring Reeves Auto's reputation and customer trust. Helen also instituted regular training sessions on business ethics, emphasizing that honesty, respect for customers, and personal accountability are non-negotiable requirements for every employee. "We don't just sell cars," she would repeat. "We sell trust. And for customers to trust us, we must first be honest with ourselves." Under Helen's passionate, determined leadership, the dealership's atmosphere shifted for the better day by day. The anxiety and strain of hiding unethical practices gradually gave way to relief and pride in working within a clear, open environment. In her private office, Helen and Trevor spent hours poring over customer feedback, refining every detail of the service process to guarantee no client ever felt disappointed after leaving the dealership. This cultural transformation didn't just delight customers. It made every team member proud to wear the Reeves Auto logo again. David watched from afar, quietly pleased at the powerful changes unfolding under Helen's direction. He knew bringing her back was the right decision. No one was better suited to restore and uphold the company's core values. As he left the dealership at the end of a long day, David felt lighter. He understood that many challenges still lay ahead, but with Helen Brooks and Trevor Evans leading the way, Reeves Auto would unquestionably reclaim its status as a brand defined by honesty, transparency, and customer trust. 1 month after the comprehensive overhaul at Reeves Auto, the dealership felt entirely transformed. The previous stifling tension was gone, replaced by a relaxed, open atmosphere where genuine smiles and friendly eyes greeted every visitor. The large glass partitions Helen had insisted on installing between the finance office and sales floor had become a symbol of the dealership's absolute transparency. Now, every customer felt secure and respected the moment they stepped inside. One calm Monday morning, Amanda returned to Reeves Auto. She walked in serenely, carrying her little daughter, sound asleep in her pink bassinet, her face peaceful. Amanda's eyes glistened with emotion as she took in the dramatic changes, far exceeding anything she'd dared hope for. No sooner had she entered than Trevor Evans greeted her with his warm, welcoming smile. He approached her with gentle confidence. "Good morning, Miss Clark. It's wonderful to see you and your daughter again. Are you here for your scheduled checkup today?" Amanda returned his smile, her heart warmed by his thoughtful care. "Yes, Trevor. I'm here for the maintenance on my new car. It's running beautifully. Thank you so much." Trevor led her to the newly renovated waiting area, spacious and bright. He pulled out a plush chair and invited her to sit. "Please make yourself comfortable. I'll have a technician with you right away. And if there's anything else you need, just let me know." From a discreet corner, David stood watching the scene unfold. He felt a profound sense of pride as he witnessed the genuine, positive change in the dealership's service. His gaze lingered on Amanda and then drifted to her daughter. An image that instantly transported him back to memories of his own mother. He remembered the day his mother, a strong, single black woman, bought her very first car. He could still feel the sting of the condescending looks and cold words from salespeople who doubted she could afford it. Though she eventually drove that car off the lot, the disrespect left a lasting sadness in her heart. That memory had driven David's commitment to honesty and respect when he founded Reeves Auto. Yet he realized he had, at times, overlooked warning signs that those values were slipping away. It was Amanda's courageous stand that reminded him what truly defines a business. Not profit, but integrity, dignity, and kindness toward every single customer, regardless of who they are or where they come from. David exhaled softly, deeply grateful for this lesson. He made his way to the dealership's entrance, pausing before a newly mounted plaque. He read its simple yet powerful inscription, etched in metal. "We treat every customer as if they're buying their first car, with dignity, patience, and honesty." No flashy slogans or gimmicks, just words that carried the weight of his vision for Reeves Auto. He understood that leadership isn't about grand speeches, but about consistent, quiet actions that reflect an organization's core values every single day. Looking back inside, he saw Trevor thoughtfully assisting Amanda, and Helen patiently guiding a new team member with both firmness and encouragement. David knew these moments were the truest proof of lasting change. Change born from the hearts of the people. He allowed himself a small smile as relief washed over him. Stepping outside, he looked up at the clear blue sky, silently thanking whatever force had given him the wisdom to learn this invaluable lesson. Integrity and kindness are the greatest assets a business can protect. He vowed to himself that those values would never be lost again. Reeves Auto was embarking on a completely new chapter, one defined by transparency, respect, and unwavering honesty for every customer who passed through its doors. And he was certain that his mother, strong, resilient, and loving, was watching somewhere, proud that he had finally understood what she'd always tried to teach him. A person's dignity is worth more than any profit. Dear friends, how did the story of Reeves Auto Group's journey to reclaim its ethical foundation move you? Have you ever faced a situation like Amanda's? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you found today's story meaningful and inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to join us for more uplifting tales. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.